Mufasa was a simple man, the kind who found joy in the little things. He lived in a quiet village where the days were slow and the nights carried a peaceful stillness. He wasn't wealthy, but his heart was rich with dreams. One of those dreams was finding a love so pure it could brighten even the darkest corners of his life. He believed in fate, and it seemed fate had plans for him. One rainy evening, Mufasa crossed paths with Amara. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her grace and quiet confidence drew him in immediately. Amara was new to the village, a traveler with stories etched in her every word. She carried herself with a mix of mystery and charm, and her smile had a way of making the world feel softer. Their meeting wasn't planned. They bumped into each other in the crowded marketplace, a brief moment that would alter their lives forever. Their connection grew naturally, almost effortlessly. It started with small conversations, her asking about the village, him sharing tales of his childhood. Before long, their moments together became the highlight of each day. They would walk along the riverbank, talking about their hopes and dreams. Mufasa found himself mesmerized by her stories of distant places, while Amara seemed drawn to his warmth and kindness. He would often watch her when she wasn't looking, memorizing the way her hair danced in the wind or how her eyes lit up when she laughed. In those moments, Mufasa felt like the luckiest man alive. Amara seemed to carry a light that brightened every corner of his existence, and he wanted nothing more than to be the reason behind her smiles. As their bond deepened, Mufasa's love grew into something unwavering and steadfast. He dreamed of building a future with her, a small home where laughter would echo, a life filled with love and simplicity. To him, Amara was the answer to every silent prayer he had ever whispered. She was his muse, his joy, his everything. Amara, too, seemed invested in their love. She shared parts of herself that no one else knew, revealing her vulnerabilities and fears. She told him about her struggles, her ambitions, and her dreams of a life bigger than the one she had known. Mufasa listened intently, promising silently to be her anchor no matter where life took them. But there were moments, brief and fleeting, when Mufasa sensed something he couldn't quite put into words. Amara would occasionally grow quiet, her gaze distant, as if her mind were somewhere far away. He chalked it up to her past, respecting her need for space. After all, love, he believed, was about trust and patience. Mufasa was sure their love was unbreakable. He couldn't imagine a world where she wasn't by his side. Every heartbeat, every thought, every dream revolved around her. What he didn't realize, though, was that sometimes even the purest love isn't enough to shield against the unseen cracks that begin to form. Mufasa noticed the changes slowly at first, like the quiet shifting of seasons. Amara's once bright demeanor began to dim, replaced by moments of detachment that he couldn't ignore. She no longer seemed present during their conversations, her responses curt and distracted. The laughter that used to flow so freely between them now felt strained, as though she was carrying the weight of something unspoken. He tried to brush it off as stress or exhaustion. Amara was ambitious, always chasing bigger dreams, and he didn't want to burden her with his concerns. But the signs became harder to ignore. She started spending less time with him, often making vague excuses about errands or commitments. Her phone, once left casually on the table during their time together, now never left her hand, her messages hidden behind quick swipes and guarded glances. Mufasa's heart began to ache with uncertainty. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping away from him. One evening, as they sat together in silence, he asked her gently if everything was all right. Amara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just a lot on my mind," she said softly. He wanted to believe her, to trust the woman he loved with everything he had. But the distance between them only grew. Then came the day Mufasa stumbled upon something that confirmed his worst fears. While tidying up their shared space, he found a letter tucked beneath a book on her desk. It was addressed to someone he didn't recognize, filled with words that cut deeper than he thought possible. Amara spoke of longing, of passion, and of a connection she couldn't ignore. The words were not meant for him. but for another man. His hands trembled as he held the letter, his mind racing with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? Had everything between them been a lie? He couldn't bring himself to confront her immediately, paralyzed by the weight of his discovery. Instead, he replayed every moment they had shared, searching for clues he might have missed, signs he should have seen. The following days were a torment. Mufasa's love for Amara fought against the anger and betrayal that threatened to consume him. He couldn't understand how someone he trusted so deeply could carry on with such deception. Despite his pain, a part of him clung to hope, desperate for an explanation that might somehow make sense of it all. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, Mufasa confronted her. He held up the letter, his voice trembling but firm. "Is this true?" he asked, his eyes searching hers for a trace of the woman he had fallen in love with. Amara's face fell, and for a moment, he saw the guilt and sorrow etched across her features. But then, she straightened, her tone defensive yet resigned. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she admitted quietly. "But I can't ignore what I feel. I've been torn between you and a life I never thought I could have." Her words landed like blows, each one chipping away at the foundation of their love. She didn't beg for forgiveness or offer false promises. Instead, she simply walked away, leaving Mufasa standing alone, his heart shattered beyond repair. In the days that followed Amara's departure, Mufasa's world felt hollow. The vibrant life he once knew was now replaced with an unbearable stillness. He couldn't escape the echoes of her words, the image of her back turned as she walked away. Every corner of his life was a reminder of her absence, places they had visited, conversations they had shared, and dreams they had built together in his mind. The weight of betrayal sat heavily on his chest, and for a time, it seemed impossible to breathe without feeling the ache of her loss. Mufasa withdrew from the world, consumed by his grief. He stopped visiting the places that once brought him peace, avoiding friends who might ask questions he wasn't ready to answer. In the quiet of his solitude, he wrestled with a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, and a lingering sense of inadequacy. What had he done wrong? How had he not seen it coming? These questions circled endlessly in his mind, offering no solace, only deeper despair. But amidst the pain, a small flicker of resilience began to grow. Mufasa realized that he couldn't let this betrayal define him. His life, though broken in that moment, was still his own. Slowly, he began to take small steps toward healing. It started with simple acts, cleaning the spaces that had once been shared with Amara, removing the physical reminders of her presence. Each act, though painful, was a step toward reclaiming his sense of self. Mufasa found strength in the people who had always stood by him. Friends and family reached out, offering support and words of encouragement. Though it was difficult at first, he began to open up, sharing his pain, and allowing others to help him carry the weight of it. Their love and kindness reminded him that he was not alone, even in his darkest moments. As time passed, Mufasa discovered solace in the things he had once loved but had set aside during his time with Amara. He returned to his passions, immersing himself in work that gave him purpose. He found joy in creating again, whether it was crafting something with his hands or helping others in the community. These small victories began to piece him back together, one fragment at a time. In his moments of reflection, Mufasa began to see the betrayal not as a failure on his part, but as a lesson in resilience. He realized that love, though powerful, is not always enough to hold two people together. He forgave himself for the pain he had endured and started to understand that Amara's actions were a reflection of her own struggles, not his inadequacies. Over time, Mufasa's heart grew lighter. He began to see the beauty in the world again, the warmth of the sunrise, the laughter of children playing nearby, the gentle rustling of the wind through the trees. These simple moments reminded him that life was still full of possibilities. Though the scars of his heartbreak remained, they no longer defined him. Instead, they became a testament to his strength, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, he had found the courage to rebuild himself. As the months passed, Mufasa stood on firmer ground, no longer haunted by the shadows of his past. The pain of betrayal had shaped him, but didn't own him anymore. He had grown into someone stronger, wiser, and more at peace with himself. Life was no longer about what he had lost, but what he could create. Each day became an opportunity to embrace the present and look forward to the future. Amara's absence was no longer a void, but a chapter he had learned to close. Occasionally, he thought of her, not with anger or longing, but with a quiet acceptance. He had realized that forgiveness wasn't about letting her back into his life, but freeing himself from the weight of resentment. He didn't need answers anymore, nor did he seek closure from her. The closure had come from within. Mufasa found himself thriving in unexpected ways. The energy he once poured into his relationship was now directed toward his dreams and ambitions. He began to achieve things he had only imagined before, carving out a path that felt entirely his own. His work became a source of fulfillment, and his contributions to the community brought him a sense of purpose. In helping others, he found healing, realizing that his struggles had equipped him with the empathy to uplift those around him. Then, one day, fate tested his newfound strength. Amara reached out, her voice hesitant but sincere. She spoke of regret, of mistakes she wished she could undo, and of the life she had chosen that hadn't turned out the way she had hoped. She apologized for the hurt she had caused and asked for a second chance, her words laced with vulnerability. Mufasa listened carefully, his heart steady as he absorbed her words. There had been a time when her voice alone would have shaken him, when the possibility of her return would have been a dream come true. But now, standing in front of the woman who had once meant everything to him, he realized he no longer needed her to complete his story. He wished her well, but made it clear that the man she had left behind no longer existed. He had moved forward, and there was no turning back. This decision didn't bring sadness or bitterness, but rather a deep sense of peace. It was a testament to how far he had come, a moment that solidified his journey from heartbreak to healing. Mufasa walked away from that conversation lighter, knowing he had made the right choice for himself. His story wasn't defined by betrayal or loss, but by the resilience he had discovered within. He stood at the edge of a new beginning, ready to embrace whatever came next with an open heart. Love, he realized, wasn't just about finding the right person, but about valuing himself and building a life that reflected his worth. The lessons of his past had shaped him into someone who understood the beauty of impermanence. Nothing lasted forever, but in every ending, there was a chance to start anew. Mufasa's journey wasn't perfect, but it was his own, a story of courage, growth, and hope.